The New York Mets made a trade for reliever Phil Maton. They won a close game against the Nationals that was only close because of another bullpen meltdown. And Kodai Senga made a rehab start. I'll talk about it all on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code, all in lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And we will talk about the trade that the Mets made on Tuesday to acquire Phil Maton from the Tampa Bay Rays. But let's open things up with another great Mets victory. A rematch, Jake Irvin versus Jose Quintana. And boy, did the New York Mets get some revenge on Irvin. After the game, I think it was Brandon Nimmo. It was either Nimmo or Lindor that said the last time they got some pitches to hit over the heart of the plate and they just didn't do it. Tonight, they certainly did. It all started with a big rally in the second inning, a two-out rally. Jeff McNeil draws a walk. Harrison Bader gets a base hit to turn the lineup over. Francisco Lindor drives in McNeil with a knock. And then Brandon Nimmo comes up, and the non-all-star hits a three-run homer to give the Mets a early 4-0 lead. And that's all Jose Quintana needed. Quintana was brilliant once again. Over his last 5 starts, he has a 0.89 ERA, and he has put together 4 quality starts during that span. He has been sensational. A lot of that has aligned with Francisco Alvarez coming off the IL and catching every one of his starts. What he has done for Quintana and Minaya has been unbelievable. I'm not just going to give all the credit to Alvarez. These guys are stepping up and they're making the big pitches, but Alvarez just gives them that confidence for whatever it is, and it has just been working for these guys, where all of a sudden you're looking at Minaya and Quintana and you're saying, these guys don't just look like back-end starters, they look like legitimate middle-of-the-rotation starters that you actually feel good about if you're handing the ball to them in a playoff game. That is how well they've pitched. It's been remarkable to see, and this was an incredible performance by Quintana. He allows 1 hit, hits a batter, and walks 1. All of that came in the 3rd inning, where he gives up a leadoff single. Harrison Bader makes an error on the play that allows Luis Garcia to get to second base, gets 2 big strikeouts, but then you get to the real scary part of the order. C.J. Abrams and Lane Thomas, particularly Thomas facing a left-handed pitcher. He hit C.J. Abrams. It almost felt like he aimed for the elbow guard. Just put him on first base with the first base open. So that put 2 runners on for Thomas, pitched carefully there, walks him to load the bases. Then he gets the rookie James Wood out to get out of that jam. And from that point on, he retired the next 12 batters in order. So it was 13 in a row, including Wood. And he gets all the way through the 7th inning, having allowed just 1 hit, 1 walk, 1 hit by pitch, no runs. And it was the first time since Jacob deGrom back in 2019 that the Mets have had a starting pitcher make 2 consecutive starts where they've gone 7 innings without allowing a run. And it was the first time in Mets history that they've had a pitcher do that twice in a row against the same opponent. So a ridiculous set of starts here for Quintana against a Nationals team that might not be the best, but to face the exact same lineup and carve them up even better than the last time out, really impressive stuff. And the only shame in all of this is that the New York Mets had to dip into their bullpen and throw not just Dedniel Nunez, but pitch all of Nunez, Garrett, and Diaz in a game where they were winning 6-0 when Quintana left, as Francisco Lindor hit a 2-run homer as well. So how does that even add up? If you told me before the game, Jose Quintana is going to give you 7 great innings and allow just 1 hit, no runs, you were going to get a 3-run homer from Nimmo and a 2-run homer from Lindor, not to mention Lindor driving in a 3rd run earlier in that game as well. So 3 RBIs from both of your non-all-stars. If you were to tell me all that was going to happen, I would have thought, all right, so what happened? They went to Jose Budo for 2 innings, or Adrian Houser got an inning, and Eric Orzi got an inning. No. it was just a disaster in the bullpen again. Adam Ottavino does come on for the 8th inning. He gives up a double, then a 2-run homer. Gets a fly out, but then he hits CJ Abrams. And at that point, with the state of the bullpen and the way things can get away from you, Carlos Mendoza, little gun shy. He didn't trust that Ottavino could get the final 2 outs. He goes to Nunez, who gets them through the 8th. Then, bottom half of the inning, the Mets tack on another run. You had Tyrone Taylor who hit a triple, and then Jeff McNeil came through with an RBI double. So now, once again, you got a big lead, and still he didn't trust Eric Orzi or any other reliever to come in. He goes to Reed Garrett, who he had up in the 7th inning, I think, also, when Quintana was still pitching. Can't remember if he had him up in the 8th as well. I don't think he did, because I think it was sort of Nunez's inning, but he tries to have Garrett get through the 9th. He has a bad inning. He gives up a double and a home run, gets a strikeout, gets a ground out, but then he walks a batter, and Edwin Diaz comes into the game. Now, you can say, man, Garrett had 2 outs there. Why is he doing that? But if Reed Garrett gives up another base runner, and then you go to Edwin Diaz, and then Diaz gives up a 3-run homer, tie ball game. So I understood why Mendoza did what he did as far as going to get Diaz in that spot. It only took, I think, 4 pitches for him to get the strikeout and an easy save. But it just says so much about the state of the Mets bullpen that you'd have such a big lead, and it's such an agonizing process just to get the final 6 outs. And it starts with having guys like Adam Ottavino and Jake Diekman that just look past their prime. And Adam Ottavino had a good run lately prior to this one where it seemed like he started to figure some things out. I don't think they're going to cut ties with him lightly. Same thing with Diekman, although I think that's maybe trending towards an end sooner than later. But it's one of those situations where those guys just can't even get you out in lopsided games. And it makes these games close enough where you have to burn your top end relievers. And now going into the game tomorrow, who do you have available? Do you have to throw Nunez again on back-to-backs when you want to stay away from that? Garrett just looks overworked. If there's one guy on the Mets' entire roster that I think needs this all-star break more than anyone else, it's Reed Garrett. I think he is on fumes at this point of the season. And Edwin Diaz is rested, and he'll be fine to go again tomorrow. But this is a team that needs a lopsided victory against Patrick Corbin. They need Luis Severino to give them a lot of length. And hopefully they can get through the middle innings and not the end of the game without going to their high leverage guys so they're fresh for Thursday. But as much as it was a great win and there's a lot of positives to take from the lineup to Quintana's performance, the bullpen continues to be the narrative that carries over for us show after show after show. The good thing is there's a new arm that has entered the picture. I want to talk about Phil Maton in just a minute, the trade that the Mets just made. We'll go through it. First, though, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities that you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities. After the All-Star break, the New York Mets will be playing the Miami Marlins. If you want to check out that series, head over to Booking.com with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. The next time you go to a Mets game, whether it's in New York at Citi Field or if you do travel to Miami for their next road series against the Marlins, make sure you're using GameTime. Today's episode of Locked On Mets is also brought to you by GameTime, the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. I'm at this point with GameTime where I don't even think to buy tickets before I am on my way to the ballpark. A lot of times till I'm right outside of the ballpark. Then I open up the app and I scan for the best deals on last-minute tickets. You can view your seat before you arrive so you know exactly what to expect. You see all-in prices up front, so you can take all the guesswork out of buying tickets, and you can get your tickets in the matter of, seconds, really. Doesn't even take you a full minute. If you know what you're looking for, you go in there, you find your seats, 2 taps, you're all set, and you're ready to go in and enjoy a great game. Download the GameTime app today and use the code LOCKEDON. and you're going to get $20 off your first order. Again, download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Also, if you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to make a push to 9,000 subs by the All-Star break. We're within 100, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, let's talk about the trade that the Mets made on Tuesday. They acquired Phil Maton from the Tampa Bay Rays for cash considerations or a player to be named later, so we don't know exactly what's going back to Tampa in this deal. What we do know is the Mets are taking on the rest of his salary. He is owed, I think, about $2.5 million left, something like that. Regardless, it was a $6.5 million deal that he signed with the Rays prior to the start of the season. That carried a club option for $7.75 million that has a $250,000 buyout. The Mets were interested in Maton this offseason. He chose to sign with the Rays, and he's had an up and down year. 4.58 ERA in 40 appearances. He had a really tough start to the season in April, had a great May with an ERA under 2. Then he faltered a little bit in June, but a lot of that is held towards 2 really bad outings. Really, if you look at his season, actually, I counted through all the appearances, 40 appearances, which is a lot of work for Maton. He's obviously an arm that went to a ton in that Rays bullpen. Of those 40 appearances, 32 of them were scoreless. There was 8 appearances where he allowed runs and 3 that were particularly bad. One where he gave up 5 runs to the Angels. That was in April. And then there was 2 outings in June where he faced the Orioles. Remember, I told you he had a really good May, right? These 2 outings against the Orioles in June really got to him. They scored 7 runs. He only got 4 outs across the 2 appearances. That's really what ballooned his ERA that month. Since those appearances against Baltimore, remember, that's a great lineup. He has pitched to a 0.75 ERA over his last 12 innings. That's on 11 appearances. He's allowed just 6 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 11 strikeouts. So he's throwing the ball really well. David Stern said of the trade that they really think he made some adjustments lately as far as attacking the strike zone more, his pitch usage that are beneficial to him that should allow him to remain as effective as he's been. A guy that they were interested in, like I mentioned, during the offseason, and someone who has been pitching in bullpens on really good teams for some time now. He was with the Astros most recently prior to this season with the Rays. 3 seasons in Houston. The first one not so great in 2021, but 2022 and 2023 he was very effective. 3.84 ERA in 22, even 3 ERA in 2023. Pitched at least 65 innings each of those 2 years. And you look at his work done in the postseason. Guy's been exceptional throughout his career. 20 and 2/3 innings pitched, has allowed just 2 earned runs, has a 0.83 postseason ERA, and a lot of that came over the last couple of years pitching with the Astros. If you want to know about his pitch mix, he doesn't throw very hard. Okay, he's got a cutter that he throws at 88 miles per hour. That's the primary pitch, but he also works his curveball and sweeper in plenty. It's really a 3-pitch mix, although has a couple more pitches he might go to, but it is particularly cutter, curve, sweeper. So a lot of movement, a lot of changing the eye level on a hitter, trying to work inside, outside, a controlled pitcher that is going to try to keep the ball on the ground and can just get outs for you. So I love this move because it doesn't cost anything really to get him other than taking on his salary. We'll find out. Maybe it is a player to be named later and those could come back to haunt you. But a lot of times it's basically just setting someone that you haven't even really gotten a chance to develop that another organization might like as well, that they wanted to sign, and you're just allowing them to develop in a new organization. It's not really a player that you've invested a ton in that heads back the other way. So I think that this was a great move by the Mets to get a reliever in here now, not have to wait until the deadline. This gives you some reinforcements when you desperately need them, that the Rays are potentially going to turn over a lot of pieces at this deadline. I see them being a potential seller, and I would look at Jason Adam and Pete Fairbanks as some relievers that would be great to add as well. But those guys are going to cost a lot more when it comes to prospects. And those deals are going to take place closer to the deadline as they're going to try to drum up a bidding war for those guys. I think this was an opportunity that the Rays probably saw to get some money off their books. Maybe do the Mets a little bit of a favor here and we'll see what they do with that roster spot. I'm sure there's some other layer to this that they decided to make this deal with as well. Another reason for it, I should say, other than just clearing the money. But it's a good move by the Mets. It really is. And as far as a role for him, I'd imagine that he's going to pitch some of those middle innings, the 6th inning, the 7th inning. It's funny. I saw some tweets out there about how he has an ERA that's pretty bad in the 8th inning or later this year, and his ERA in the 6th and the 7th has been really good. And so I was like, at first, I didn't want to read too much into that, because one bad outing in the 8th inning, when you've maybe only thrown 7 innings all year, if you give up 5 runs against the Angels in an 8th inning, I'm not entirely positive that took place in an 8th inning, but just for an example, that's going to balloon and really change that small sample size and allow you to sort of fit it into a narrative. So I really didn't take too much stock in that, but I figured I should look into it. So I went back to last year, and then I also went back to 2022. He really has struggled in the 8th inning. 7.04 ERA in the 8th inning in 2023. 2022, 5.63 ERA. And granted, the sample size was small last year in the 8th, but the year prior, it was a pretty large sample size of innings. He had worked split down the middle basically between the 6th, 7th, and 8th for the Astros, and was really bad in the 8th. So maybe that is something that the Mets take some stock in, that probably better to pitch him in the 7th. And I think Dedniel Nunez is becoming the clear 8th inning guy, with Garrett being the alternative. So if you look at where the bullpen's at after this move, I feel like there's 4 arms that are going to be there through the rest of the season, barring health. And that's Diaz, Nunez, Garrett, and Maton. And then there's a lot of questions beyond that. Is Hauser going to stick in the bullpen all year, or is he someone that eventually gets designated for assignment? Or who knows, maybe the Mets find a trade partner for Hauser. It sounds crazy, but I don't know. The Brewers have been acquiring a bunch of these pitchers to try to put a Band-Aid over the bullet wound that is their rotation, after they've dealt Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff being out and missing Wade Miley this year, all these different things. Would they want Hauser back? I mean, just take him on? I don't know. I don't know if Hauser's a guy that could be cleared. Regardless, that is a potential spot that could open up in the bullpen if the Mets make some moves. Is Budo going to stay in the bullpen all year, or does he transition back into a starter role if Christian Scott needs to be shut down for an innings limit, or if there's another injury? I think that's always a possibility. You have Ottavino and Diekman, who could hold on to bullpen spots this year, but I think the Mets might be better without those guys. There's Shintaro Fujinami, who could come back soon. Also, when Kodai Senga comes back, you're going to go to a 6-man rotation. So there's only going to be 7 spots in the bullpen. So just kind of looking at where the Mets are at as you zoom out, I think there's 4 guys now that will be there for the rest of the year. And there's 3 spots that are sort of in flux that the Mets are going to have to figure out once they get to a 6-man rotation and a 7-man bullpen. That's figuring out who the long man is. Is it Hauser? Is it Budo? Is it both of them? Does Fujinami factor in? And what other relievers can they acquire at this deadline? Maton's great, but you're acquiring him for cash or a player to be named later. Is there a prospect that's sent out at this deadline to fortify the bullpen? Can they get a Jason Foley, a Pete Fairbanks, a Jason Adam, one of these guys that can not only hold down high leverage spots, but be an alternative closer when Edwin Diaz isn't good to go? Because as great as Nunez has looked, and as much as I think he can thrive in that role, that's asking a lot out of a rookie, and Reed Garrett is not a good alternative closer. So I think the Mets still have work to be done in their bullpen, but getting Maton now on July 9th to factor into your bullpen for the next couple of weeks before the deadline, really solid work by this front office, and it shows that they have it on the phones. It's just not a time of year where you typically see trades made, and as David Stern said to the media after the deal, it was a nice call today to find out that they could get something done and bring some reinforcements to that bullpen. Speaking of reinforcements, Kodai Senga made another rehab start. I want to talk about that, and also the corresponding move for Maton, which was Joey Lucceshi getting DFA'd. A little bit of a surprising one. We'll go through that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for some promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB on the Prize Picks app for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime some news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, and you also get the starting lineup graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's going to be the Mets starting 9. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so looking at the New York Mets 40-man roster, it was a little bit surprising that Joey Lucceshi got DFA'd. The Mets had to make a move. They do have a full 40. I think I texted the insiders that they had 39 on the roster. I miscounted, so I do apologize to you guys on that one. But regardless, there was other moves that could have been made. For example, Tyler J still has a roster spot on the 40 right now. How does Tyler J give you more this season than Joey Lucceshi? How is he more valuable to hold on to a 40-man spot? I don't know the answer to that. Doesn't make sense to me. Ty Adcock has a 40-man roster spot. Cole Sulser has a 40-man roster spot. Josh Walker, Danny Young, Grant Hartwig are all younger relievers that I can sort of understand why you want to hang on to them. The first 3 are guys that are a little bit further into their careers that very well could go either way and don't seem to have a long future with the Mets. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to me that Lucchesi was the guy that was optioned. I will note that David Stearns in the media availability session said that they hope they will be able to retain him. So to me, this is trying to push Joey Lucchesi through waivers. And this might just be one of those moments that David Stearns has a lot more information than me, a lot smarter than me, and knows what he's doing. And maybe Lucchesi stays with the Mets in Syracuse, but no longer has to have a spot on the 40. If that's the case, great move, honestly. We'll see, because Joey Lucchesi is a good pitcher. I don't think that he is a great starting pitcher, but he's good depth to have. Has a 4.20 ERA and 15 starts in Syracuse this year, and that's a tough league to consistently pitch in. A lot of bandboxes, a lot of good lineups, and he's fared really well, and he's gone deep in some of his last couple starts. I thought it made sense to even at some point, if you really were desperate for a left-handed reliever, try Lucchesi out. I just felt like he's a better pitcher than Jake Diekman right now in particular, and honestly, I would have loved that move. If the move today was the Mets trade for Phil Maton and they DFA Jake Diekman, I would have been on board with it. I think the Mets and their front office still believe that Jake Diekman has good stuff, has a track record, and they're not ready to give up on him. That's great as long as he's not costing you games. So trying to find advantageous spots to put him in on, hopefully that works. And maybe he does get right, and maybe I eat my words on Jake Diekman, but I don't see how he continues to hold on to a roster spot and a spot in the bullpen, honestly. So we'll see what they decide to do after this. Again, if Lucchesi stays with the Mets organization and passes through waivers, then hats off to the organization. Good move. And I will also acknowledge that the 40-man roster is full, and there's other guys that are coming off the 60-day IL soon. You have Shintaro Fujinami, who could come back very soon here and be part of that bullpen. You have Kodai Senga as well that can be part of the rotation and off the 60-day IL. So at that point, maybe you need to clear out some spots. And whether that is the time when you bring up Fuji that you would DFA Diekman, or maybe that is where you would clear a spot by getting rid of Tyler J. I guess the Mets at this point are more concerned about their bullpen. So they decided to hold on to all the relievers that have the optionality so they can continue probably to cycle arms. Maybe that's something that the franchise values. And again, if Lucchesi is able to pass through waivers, it's all fine and well. Also, I'll note when Senga comes back and you get to a 6-man rotation, that should probably be some combination of Senga, Severino, Minaya, Christian Scott, Jose Quintana, and David Peterson. You're looking at Budo, who's in the bullpen, but is further starter depth. McGill, obviously, is more starter depth. Adrian Hauser, If everything falls out for the Mets, would be even more starter depth. So if you look at it from that perspective, a guy that's either 9th or potentially 10th on the depth chart, maybe I shouldn't be crying too much about Joey Lucceshi. Now, in Syracuse, Kodai Senga made that rehab start, his second one as he's trying to come back from that shoulder injury that plagued him for most of this year. He went 2 2/3, allowed 2 hits, walked 2, struck out 3. The 2 walks were his last 2 batters that he faced. That pushed the pitch count over 50, so he threw 52 pitches on the day, 30 of which were strikes. Last time out, he threw 35 pitches. He said he feels good, he feels healthy, which is the most important thing. Throwing hard again and has a good ghost fork still from the little bit of highlights I was able to see. So Kodai Senga definitely on the mend here. And if you sort of look at the roadmap for him moving forward, they've been starting him every 6th day. That 6th day will fall on Monday now, which is the first day of the All-Star break. And that All-Star break is not just at the major league level, that's through the minors as well. So maybe the Mets get together a sim game for him, whether that's in Brooklyn or in Syracuse, wherever they can get a collection of hitters that he can face in a live game. I think that's probably the next course of action here. So you keep him on that schedule. I don't think that you want to all of a sudden shut down Senga when he's feeling good and he's pitching every 6 days. Ideally, you want to keep this going for the rest of the season. So I bet you they find a way to get some batters in front of him on Monday. And then that would set him up for his next start to be Sunday the 21st, likely in Syracuse. That goes well, and he ramps up 15 pitches each time. He was at 50 on this one. That'd be 65 next time. All of a sudden, you go up to 80. He should be good for maybe even 95 pitches and potentially in a major league game. I talked about this in the past. I have it circled as July 27th. That's a Saturday against the Braves at home. I think if all goes well from this point on, there's no more setbacks. I believe that's when we'll see Kodai Senga return to the mound at Citi Field to a crowd that probably would be on fire to see him right before the deadline. Could be some really awesome stuff when you get him back. And I think the best part about this is it sets things up where Christian Scott's going to make the start this week on 4 days rest. And that'll be it for the rest of the season as far as needing him to start on regular rest. They'll be able to get him an extra day that point on because you can come out of the All-Star break, go to Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, and then Christian Scott or David Peterson. I'd imagine Scott to break up the 3 lefties, go to Peterson, then you go back around to Sevy, Manaea, Quintana, and then that would bring up that game against the Braves where you could slide Kodai Senga into the rotation before you'd pitch Christian Scott. If you wanted to, you could even give him some extra rest, slide Peterson in next on regular rest, then you go back to Christian Scott, and then that would be your 6-man rotation, hopefully for the rest of the season. Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Christian Scott. Pretty good group. I really think that that's a unit that should be able to help the Mets go through the final stretch of the season and put together a really good August, a really good September, and hopefully grab a playoff spot. Obviously, more work needs to be done in the bullpen. We can talk about the outfield situation with DJ Stewart right now and Jeff McNeil. There's other things that we'll talk about as we get towards the trade deadline. Have a lot of really good deadline stuff for you next week during the All-Star break, but you're starting to see the vision of how the Mets can get through this season. And Kodai Senga being back in the fold is just such a massive addition for this team, especially if you are fortunate enough to get into October where you can go into a wild card series and have, honestly, the way Manaea and Quintana are pitching, maybe it's one of those guys or both of them that are in a playoff rotation. But to be able to give the ball to Kodai Senga for game 1, Severino for game 2, I feel pretty good about the Mets' chances to do a little bit of damage, maybe, at least in the wild card round, if not pushing beyond that into the division round of the playoffs if they can get there. Now, the best way to do that is to take advantage of the schedule this week because you took care of the game that I think was the most difficult throughout the entire week here. Jake Irvin, after the way that he pitched against the Mets on the 4th of July, thought that'd be a tough matchup. The Mets handled that with ease. Now you got Patrick Corbin. So don't lose a Patrick Corbin day, especially when you got your current ace in Severino on the mound. Hopefully the Mets can take that game, take this series early, have a chance to get a sweep on Thursday. And then you got the Rockies coming into town, a team that the Mets should be able to handle pretty well. Right now, they're at 500 at 45-45. Wouldn't it be sweet to be 5 games over at the break? It's not impossible. It's right out in front of the Mets if they can take advantage over the next couple days here. But even if they can just make sure they win each of these next 2 series, they're going to be feeling pretty comfortable when they get to the All-Star break. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you who tuned into the show. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Again, our goal is to get to 9,000 subs by the All-Star break. We are very close, so I appreciate all of you. Continue to subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You can find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV.